Just one sentence at the end of a recent 1 hour journaling session gave me the exact clarity that I need at this chapter of my life. If you are someone who feels like you need more clarity right now in your life, stick around because I'm going to help you. Let's start with a couple of questions. First, how can you know yourself and guide yourself and trust yourself if you're not having regular constructive conversations with yourself? Next question. How could your conversations with yourself be constructive if they are never structured? How can your self-reflection, to make this more precise, be constructive if all of your self-reflection happens in the shower or when you're unable to sleep at night, troubled by your struggles, troubled by your problems, challenges, and conflicts? What am I talking about here? I'm talking about regular, structured self-reflection. That's what journaling should be. Or, to correct myself, that's what most journaling should be. Why regular and structured? Because if you have not yet developed a close relationship with yourself, where you can honestly say, listen, David, I trust myself, I can guide myself. If you are not there yet, you need a structured approach to start developing this relationship with yourself, and you need to continue in a structured way to nurture this relationship. What do I mean by this? By structured, I mean simply that we have some theme, some intention, or some prompts for our conversations with ourselves. By the way, I'm someone who advocates regularly for going on a walk and having that conversation with yourself. Self-reflection in the form of speaking to yourself, in the form of recording voice notes to yourself, or maybe if you feel like you can, having that conversation internally. Although I would say a lot of that internal conversation gets lost, and thoughts expressed externally are the clearest thoughts. That's why writing is the most precise and clear form of thinking. But for now, let's say that it is an option to go on a walk and have that internal dialogue. However, right now I want to focus for a moment on writing, because even though I'm advocating strongly for having those walks, because walking is also something that extremely helps extremely well with thinking, with clearing out your mind. However, if you are someone who needs that structure, if you are recognizing yourself as someone who doesn't know where to start with self-reflection, you need some prompts. Again, prompts, intention, or a theme. How to approach that conversation with yourself. Because once again, as much as I value also those thoughts and internal dialogues that we have under the shower or in bed when we are unable to sleep, and as profound as those thoughts can be, they are rarely structured, which more often than not leads to them not being very constructive. So, if we say that we need theme, intention, or prompts for having a structured conversation with ourselves, let's talk about what your theme could be. Here is something that I say to every single person I'm working with, every single member of my community, every single person that I get to interact with in the real world, in the online space, whatever. Start developing the ability, the skill to look at your life as a story. So by far, the easiest prompt to start with, but also a prompt that is relevant for every single living human, is: what has been the title or theme of the story of your life up to this point? If you start with this, my friend, my brother, my sister, if you start with this, there is no way that you don't start developing a closer relationship with yourself. Every single moment of my journaling is in the context of looking at my life as a story. I can give you an example that after 2 years of suffering multiple panic attacks, and the last panic attack seemed to me like a full-blown psychosis. After 2 years of that, to put it that way, I figured them out, for the lack of better expression. I figured them out. I solved them. Some of the most troubling experiences, at least internal, apart from some family struggles, apart from interpersonal relationships and conflicts, those panic attacks were the most challenging moments of my personal development because they left me, to be quite honest, doubting my sanity for almost 2 years. But after 2 years, I managed to figure them out only because I looked at my life as a story. And by the way, I wasn't journaling on those panic attacks every single day for 2 years and then somehow figured them out. No. I went on to live my life, and my journaling was, once again, approaching my life story more broadly, and then, only then, reflecting on specific points of that story. And one day, somewhere down the road, unexpectedly, on that day, I figured out what all of that was about. So I would say even it could be the case for most people that you don't want right away to go into dissecting and analyzing a painful experience. You might want, I know that worked extremely well for me, to go and live your life if the experience didn't leave you incapable of engaging with the real world. And I would always argue that we have the capacity to engage with the real world. But now, to not go down that tangent, because that's a whole different conversation, I do believe in our capacity to always engage with some daily tasks and obligations. So I would advise, for most people, it could be beneficial to first engage with the real world, start moving forward, or at least don't pause your life so that you can collect some new context, and then you approach reflecting on that experience. But because that's something that cannot be said universally for everyone, I will now refrain from going deeper into how can you figure out an extremely painful experience through journaling. I'm not giving that promise because that would require talking one-on-one with that specific person, seeing where they are, when that happened, how long ago was it, what chapter of their life, again chapter because it's a story, what chapter of their life that was, what chapter of their life they're in now, and many different nuances that are needed to address or acknowledge in order to approach this in a more specific way, in a more personalized way. But to go back to things that are universal, if you start with this question, as I said, what has been the theme or the title of the story of my life up to this point? And then you ask, am I satisfied with that title or theme? What would I want the title or the theme of the story of my life to be moving forward? Let's not deal with regret. Let's not deal with trying to change the past before we have continued living. Because keep in mind, you can change the past. But you can change the past only as a result of your relationship with the present and the future. Because the past is changeable. It is changeable due to the fact that the function of the past is to inform the present and the future, not to keep you locked in a certain way of living, not to keep you locked in a certain set of beliefs, not to condemn you, not to restrict you. You know, a lot of people think and live like they are restricted and doomed even by their past. The past is changeable, however, you have to engage in your life and you have to be moving forward in a constructive manner in order to change the past. So, right now, when I say let's not try to change the past, I mean don't journal on, what I wish my past looked like, or what I wish was the actual appropriate title of the story of my past or of the story of my life up to this point. Let's not deal with that. Let's deal with how could we title the story of your life up to this point, and then what do you want the title to be for the rest of your story. Then we can look at some chapters. The easiest thing is to look at this chapter right now. What is the current chapter of the story of my life? What is the theme? What is the title? Am I satisfied with that title? Do I want to change it? Did I give the title based on my failures, my shortcomings, my recent mistakes? Or am I giving the title based on what I want to achieve and what I want this chapter to be? How you give the chapter, what context you draw upon to name the chapter, that will also tell you something about yourself. So once again, I would say by far the most universally beneficial starting point for developing regular, structured practice, or a practice of regular and structured conversations with yourself, is to start looking at your life as a story and to start interacting with the story of your life. Then, after that, it gets more nuanced and it gets more personal. But what I would say is to keep this in mind. You are reflecting on the past to extract valuable context for the creation of the present and the future. You are using new experiences from the present, and you can use plans for the future to bring new context to the past and interpret the past in a different way. I'm not here talking about fake positive thinking. I'm not here talking about trying to reinterpret and reframe your pains and struggles and traumas as if they were actually happy moments and to see them as positive, good vibes only. I'm not about that stuff. I'm talking about thinking creatively. Because look at the best stories. They are not good vibes only. They have tragic elements. They have a lot of pain and sorrow and suffering. However, when you look at the whole of the story, that pain and sorrow and suffering and moments of loneliness, they make sense for the coherent whole narrative. Your life is a story. Your life can be like that. I would say when it comes to trying to extract context from the plans for the future, that's higher level, to put it that way. That can make you a bit confused. I would say look at what is currently happening, what has recently been happening, the recent and current developments of your life, and use them as added context for the past. And vice versa. So the point is that you're constantly making cross-references over and over and over again. Now, for those of you who feel like, okay, I'm at peace with my past, I really don't need to change my past, I don't need to make peace with my past because I already am. I just want more clarity for the future. Still, look at your life as a story. Because if you give it a name, a title, if you identify what this chapter is about, I guarantee you will start writing. So rather than brain dumping, although it can be immensely valuable, brain dumping, if you're lacking clarity, let's start with a prompt and then brain dump. Okay, so what is the current chapter of my life? And then brain dump. Not trying to write a story that someone else is going to read. Brain dump, but with an initial prompt. Because brain dumping on its own, I do that, by the way. I do both, but currently I've been doing some morning pages where I wake up and I sit at my desk and without any initial prompt, I just start pouring out the first thing that comes to my mind. And sometimes it ends up being the whole narrative, like the whole full thread from that very first thought until the end of the journaling session. Sometimes I'm jumping from topic to topic and I unexpectedly arrive at a place where it actually makes sense how I arrived there, but I would never have guessed that I would arrive there from where I started. However, I'm speaking as someone who has been having these constructive conversations with himself on a regular basis for over 5 years at this point. So if you're not there, and I'm not going to tell you where's the barrier, I'm not going to tell you where's the bar, okay, after this amount of hours of journaling, then you can do just plain brain dumping without any prompt. I'm not going to tell you that. Try brain dumping without any prompt, because it might be valuable for you. But for some of you who feel like you are frozen, you take your notebook, you open it, and you don't have any prompt, and you cannot brain dump because you don't know where to start. It feels weird. It feels like it's not making any sense. I mean, you could just learn to say to yourself, it's okay that it doesn't make any sense. Let me just get my thoughts out. However, if you're struggling with it, start with having some prompts and then brain dump in the context of the prompt. So, my friends, you cannot know yourself, guide yourself, or trust yourself if you're not having regular, constructive conversations with yourself. Your conversations with yourself cannot be constructive if they are not structured. For your conversations with yourself to be structured, they need to have a theme, an intention, or a prompt, or multiple prompts. By far, the most universal prompt or a theme, it can also count as an intention, although intention could be something broader. In any case, by far the most universal piece of advice for having a structured conversation with yourself is to start looking at your life and treating your life as a story. The most universal prompt and the most basic but immensely valuable starting point is to ask yourself, what has been the theme and the title of the story of my life up to this point? Am I satisfied with the theme and the title? What do I want the theme and the title of the rest of the story of my life to be? Then, what is the current chapter of the story of my life? And then, after that, we are getting into more personalized stuff, but I will give you one more. What has been the most significant chapter of the story of my life up to this point? For a lot of people, it's going to be a very challenging, painful chapter. For some people, it might be a chapter of tremendous joy and fun. But whether that chapter is marked by its pain and suffering and struggle, or whether it's marked by beautiful and joyful and fun memories, precisely because it is important, it means that it is a major part of your growth as a character. Now, if you're talking about a painful chapter, if you don't see right now how you have grown from it, then that's precisely your task, to reflect on it and to figure out either how you have already grown from it while not acknowledging it and not giving yourself the credit, or how you still can grow from that experience and from the lessons learned in it, and from the qualities and traits that were possibly obtained through those painful experiences. Then, of course, say what is the title of the chapter, describe the overall theme, and, as with all of these questions, retell the story to yourself. Retell why this is the particular title of the story of your life up to this point. Expand on it and approach that as brain dumping, not as trying to write the best essay. Expand on the story of this chapter right now, or what the story of this chapter right now should be. Expand and retell to yourself the story of that most important chapter of your life up to this point. And if you do this, day by day, little by little, address one of these prompts each day. And maybe you will repeatedly, day after day, come back to the same prompt to continue writing and to continue expanding your story. And then the best thing that happens is that you will find and discover your own prompts. Because as you go on these side notes, side tangents, down different routes of reflecting on different aspects of the same experience, you will start realizing what you should be reflecting on in the context of your particular story, your unique life story. Take on this challenge, friends. Start with these basic questions. Ask yourself these questions. Brain dump. Don't pay attention to the style. Don't try to write well. Try to just write. Then try to write honestly. Don't try to sound smart. You are doing this for yourself, not for anyone else. And with this, you will be developing a closer relationship with yourself. You will be developing a practice of constructive conversation with yourself. You will be learning to trust yourself, to guide yourself, and to be a true friend to yourself. As always, stay strong, love life, never feel sorry for yourself. Learn how to reconnect to yourself through these questions. Light that raging fire in your heart, which is one of the necessary components of looking at your life as a story, or sometimes it is a byproduct of looking at your life as a story. And as always, go beyond. Thank you.